So you've got some scraps out of your stash. I hope you have, because you will need some picture scraps and some like light tone on tone or spot squares. And today I'm going to show you how you can make a keyhole cuddle rug as a cot size for any little child. So I hope you'll follow along. It's easy to make and it's very, very colourful. My name is Elizabeth and today we are sewing smart. For this project you'll need some 7-inch squares. I've used just pale colours with tiny spot on or light tone on tone. I've got a few. You'll need 12 of those, and you will need some scrap fabrics that you're going to cut your keyholes out of. You will need border fabric that is 6.5 inches wide, and also 2.5-inch strips, which is going to be your sashing and your first border. You will also need 1 packet of fusible bias tape and some adhesive webbing that you're going to stick on the back of your fabrics before you cut out your keyholes. For the picture fabrics, I'll pop this one on here so you can see it a bit more clearly. Let me pop it on this one. I've used a frog. Now it's about 5 inches by 4, the piece of scrap fabric. You can use any picture square that you might have, like this one. It's a farm scene. You could pick out the little dog and the building at the back. I've just done that with a iron-off pen, so you can just see that, because the template that comes in the pattern, all you'll have to do is put that on and you can see through it. If you cut it out in baking paper, you can see through it, so you can pick that out and pick the little dog out. On this one I have picked out the frog. I'm putting it on a nice kind of bright background so that it stands out. So you'll need 12 again of the cutouts from your scrap fabric, and all that you will do is this one has got an elephant on. You will iron the fusible webbing on the back, draw around it, you can still see through it, and then you'll cut it out. 12 of those different ones. So I have a background square and I have cut out my keyhole from the picture fabric. I still have the fusible webbing on the back, so I'm going to remove that, position it on my square. It's approximately 1.25, between 1.25 and 1.5 from the bottom and the top. Make sure you get it as central as possible. Iron that on. Now once they're all ironed on, you'll do all 12 blocks the same with all your picture fabrics. Now this is fusible webbing, beg your pardon, fusible bias tape. It's thin little tape, bias tape. It has a sticky back that you just pull off the paper backing, and what we will do is we're going to stick that on all the way around. We're going to feed it all the way around the keyhole. Now to do this, I suggest you go and have a look at my handy hint number 19, because that will show you exactly what to do. And remember, this tape is very narrow, but you will have to stitch down both sides to make sure it's nice and secure, so when your quilt gets washed or cleaned, it won't come adrift. So I have ironed my tape on around my pictures. So I've chosen some cats, a frog and some butterflies, and I'm going to stitch that on either side of the tape using black thread, obviously, because it's black, and then that will be my top row. And I've cross cut some of the 2.5-inch strips that will simply go in between, like so, and that will be my first row. So stitch all of the bias tapes on. Don't worry about that at the moment. That was just to give you an indication of what it will look like. Make sure all of your blocks are securely stitched on, and I will then tell you about the cross cutting of your 2.5-inch strips to make your lines up. I've stitched the fusible bias around my keyholes. They make them stand out quite nice. That one's got strawberries in and I think that looks quite nice. I do try to take something of the colour, if I can, and match it with the background, but it's what makes it stand out that's best. So now I've got 6 on my board. I have 6 more here, but my board will only take at the moment 6. So I've got those laid out. I've cross-cut some of my tiny black spot 2.5 inch strips, and I'm going to stitch one to that and to that on the top row, and put one there using a 1/4 inch stitch. I'm going to sew those on. I'll repeat it for the second row, stitching the yellow to the white and the white to the mauve. So I will do that, stitch those up on all 4 rows, and then I'll come back and show you the next step, because I have cut my cross strips. I've cut them a bit generously, and that's the reason is because once you've got your 1/4 inch, I'm going to lose 1/2 inch there and 1/2 inch there, so I won't need this quite as long as that. But I'll come back when I've stitched all the small strips on to show you how we measure for that. I've put all my sashing in on the rows going across. Now I do think I may have said to you use a 1/4 inch stitch. I obviously meant a 1/4 inch seam, so I apologise for that. And now, take that piece off there. Now we need to make sure that they all measure the same, because you can have a little bit of readjusting. So mine is 24, 24, 24, and the bottom one I'm sure will be 24 as well, which it is. Okay, so that's good. Now we'll move those 2 out, move our first 2 rows down. Now the piece that goes across here, of course, is now going to have to measure 24 inches as well. So I'll cut that at 24. I will then sew just the same as I did the sashing. I'm going to sew those ones down, row 1 to row 2, row 2 to row 3, and row 3 to row 4. And then I'll come back, because some of you may not have enough fabric to do the complete border on the top and the bottom and the sides, but you can use, if you've used a black with a fine spot on, you can use a plain black homespun to go around if you haven't got enough, or choose another border, pick one of these if you've maybe got one of those, but that's entirely up to you. I have enough of this, so I will be using this. So first off, I'm going to sew the rows together now, as I said, cutting it at 24 inches. I've sewn my horizontal pieces on, so we've now got that with no border, and because this distance here is longer, because there's 4 that way and 3 this way, I'm going to put the side pieces on first for the first border. If you haven't got enough, as I said, of this first print, then use something different. That's why I'm doing it this way. So as I've cut this is now 32 inches. So as I've cut my sashing 2.5 inches across the fabric, I'm going to put this on the sides first, because I'll be left with quite a bit of fabric that I can use for something else, and I don't want any joins in my frame. So I'm going to put the 2 side pieces on, measure it, make sure you do, sew those 2 pieces on, and then when you've done that, measure across the bottom, and you will of course have the extra piece on either side. Measure that and put the top and the bottom pieces on. Do it exactly the same as you did this. The frame is now, the first border is on all the way around, so all that remains to be done now is for my second border, which I've chosen, as again from my stash, I've chosen some pretty striped colours, so it's all the colours in here. So I've chosen that, and like I did for the first one, I'm going to do the long sides first because you save fabric, and then I will measure the horizontal length and I will cut 2 pieces of that size. So 2 pieces of the length from top to bottom and 2 pieces horizontally side to side. I'll pin them and then I'll stitch them on using a 1/4 inch stitch. Now remember, when you put this final border on, as you should probably all the way through, back stitch before you start and when you finish, so that your quilt won't pull apart at the seams. Our quilt is now finished, just the top, The pattern, which is in the Etsy shop, of course, does have the amounts of fabric you would need for your backing and your batting and binding. But I've just put the borders on now, the stripe border, and I think that looks really nice. So I think that when you have this on the floor or on the bed for an afternoon nap for a child even, you can pick a story out of any of these little keyholes. They can look through the keyhole and they can choose what they would like to have as a story before they go to sleep. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, give us a thumbs up and subscribe, and don't forget, go and visit the Etsy shop, because in there is the pattern for this with everything you need to know about it, and all my other patterns. So I'll see you next time with a new project, and I hope you have fun making this one.